I wanted to start my conversation with you talking about cyber plague. Now, all of you are primarily CISOs in the ASEAN region, and you would have heard the hype that has been created by the media about cyber plague, cyber disaster, cyber World War III, cyber end of the world, and most of us are rolling our eyes and saying, here comes another term, cyber plague. But I wanted to start by taking you back to medieval England. I want to take you back to the 13th and 14th century, where 2/3 of the population was wiped out. Just imagine that. 2/3 of the population, 66% of the people that you know are dead because of one disease, and they call that the Black Death. It's also known as the bubonic plague. Now, at that point in time, if you look at the bubonic plague, there were lots of different misconceptions that actually came out. Some thought that this is actually an evil situation created because of the sins of humanity. And a lot of people said that, all right, the way to counter death or Black Death is for us to pray. So in medieval England at that point in time, there were lots of people who wanted to avoid death would actually go out and put up crosses in front of the door to actually ward off the evil that's going to be, bewildering their families so that they can protect themselves. Others thought that, that's wrong. That's not the reason why people are dying. Some of them thought that, what we should do is pick certain flowers and we should actually be breathing the air that comes through these flowers because that's going to ward off all of these, these bad spirits that are affecting us. The plague was so bad that with the termination of 2/3 of its population, it actually gave rise to the agricultural revolution because there were not enough peasants. There was an uprising because there was a shortage of labor, all because of one simple disease, which we call simple today because we don't see the plague, but at that point in time, this is a complex matter. People didn't understand what was going on. Every day there were horse carriages, they'll be walking out, they'll be actually riding through the front doors of old London, and you'll see dead bodies outside, and they'll pick up the dead bodies and they'll take them along. Families turned against families. Brothers turned against brothers. Husbands turned against wives. Nobody knew what was going on. It came to a point where if people found out that someone in your family had a plague, others in the community will come in with nails and wood and lock you in your own home by nailing you inside, leaving you to die. Now, none of these reasons actually worked out to be the reason why the bubonic plague was spreading. It actually started off in Mongolia. Now, there's a lot of dispute historically whether it started in China or started in Mongolia. Started from that side, brought through the Silk Route, and it was brought to the European region, and it hit medieval England. But the question is this: today, do we see the bubonic plague? We don't. That's already been dealt with. So when I was invited to speak at the colloquium, which is commonly known as the NSA colloquium, and I was talking to 500 academics of the biggest universities, and I said, what can I talk to them, to these academics who are all cybersecurity professionals? There'll be something new. And the research team came up with a very unique idea, and they said, take a look at the pharmaceutical industry for a second. The pharmaceutical industry, or the medical industry, right, actually have been dealing with problems that the cybersecurity community has been dealing with as well. They've been dealing with very serious catastrophic diseases. Take a look at diphtheria, take a look at polio, take a look at AIDS, take a look at, or rather HIV, take a look at the bubonic plague, take a look at, in more recent time, the swine flu, right? But they seem to have dealt with it. But us, the cybersecurity community, our problems seem to be going the other direction. We don't seem to be able to hang on to the challenges that we face, and we're not able to overcome this. So what is it that we can learn from this industry that will be something that we can do? So before we move on, there are a couple of terms that I need you to be used to, right? And that is called the difference in the pharmaceutical industry between elimination and eradication, right? So eradication means 100%, it's gone. Diphtheria, for example, which is a major reason of death, has been completely removed from earth. Now, when you talk about elimination, you're talking about a large population, right, that is commonly affected, that is no longer being affected. But if you look at all of these diseases, you look at pneumococcal disease, you look at rubella, you look at smallpox, you look at tetanus, you look at hepatitis A, influenza, all of these have been dealt with. So, if you take a look at, I'm going to take a slide back real quickly. If you take a look at the medical industry, and I come back to the Black Death, to the bubonic plague, you would see that this is not a new disease. This has been around for a very long time. This was actually discovered 224 BC. But it took them more than 100 years to discover that actually the way to deal with this is not because Satan is after you. It's not because you are unhappy. It's not because you're not breathing clean air. It took them 100 years to realize that all we got to do is actually keep our hygiene at a certain level. And what we got to do is we got to ensure that we clean the streets. So what happened was people started cleaning streets. Public health became a very important part of society. And as they started cleaning the streets, they started getting rid of all of the rubbish of the city. People started improving their personal health. You realize that the population of the rats actually came down, and because of that, the fleas that was living on the rats actually came down, and because of that, the issue of plague was actually eradicated. But it took them 100 years to deal with this. And then it was not until 1796 when a Russian scientist in Calcutta, India, discovered the vaccination. If you look at the problem that you're talking about, it took them 2,000 years to solve this problem. 2,000 years. Now take a look at this in our perspective. Cyber world. How old is a cyber problem that we're dealing with? It's not even 100 years yet, right? But we are on this journey. We're trying to find a solution. And if you try to draw a correlation between the cyber world and the medical world, you realize we're actually following a very similar path. If you look at the concept of quarantine, right, we have quarantine too. They used to quarantine people. I mean, if you take a look now, you take a flight and you fly down from one city to another. They realize you've got high fever. They're going to quarantine you, put you into a holding room and says, okay, hang on, you're not allowed to mix with the general population. And what does that do? That avoids the spread of the disease to other people. And public health officials are responsible for this. But if you look at us, quarantine, we do that as well. I mean, the whole idea of firewall, intrusion detection systems, or IPS is all the entire concept is a quarantine as well. And then if you look at it from another aspect, they talk about hygiene. They started cleaning the streets. They started ensuring that the public awareness campaign was increased. People started understanding that you actually have to be clean to ensure that you're not being infected. And take a look at us. We have followed a similar term too. We have cyber hygiene as well. And that's why we have got education. That's why we come up with policies. That's why we start training our knowledge workers across our organization on what are the actual risks that are affecting an organization and how they should actually be having a highly hygiene and sterile environment to ensure that our data breaches don't occur. So the question for us in this room, for the leaders and for the community at large across the world is, well, what is our vaccination? How are we going to vaccinate this problem? And if we take a look at what we've been doing over the years, at least, I mean, much shorter than 100 years, we've done a couple of things, right? If I were to go deeper into my talk, and I were to talk into a pharmaceutical industry, they've actually, when you talk about vaccination, there's active and passive vaccination. Right? So an active vaccination is where I'm actually going to put in the actual germ into your body in a very small dosage and let the antibodies of your body actually react to it. And a passive is where I get a dead version of the virus injected into your body, right? And it works similarly. Now, if you look at the cyber world, we have active and passive immunization too. But I'm not going to talk to you about that. The whole concept of ethical hackers. Take a look at it. Ethical hackers. What are ethical hackers doing? What are penetration testers doing? We're actually, putting in various exploits into an organization so that we are able to exploit our own networks, and then we're able to see how we can actually improve. And what happens in an organization? We become a resilient organization as a result of that. So we have kind of taken parts of this natural progression that the pharmaceutical industry uses in the cybersecurity world already. But the question really is that solving the problem? It's not. Because our problem is wide. We have got so many areas that we need to protect. So the question really is this. If you were a rich aristocrat in medieval England, chances of you getting the bubonic plague is reduced, is diminished. Because you work with an affluent community, the hygiene areas in the areas where you live is much higher, and because of that, you're not going to be having, the chances of a bubonic plague. But in our world, the bigger you are, the bigger the risk. All of the major giants have been compromised, if not attacked, if not, had some sort of breaches. The only difference is some of us report it, some of us don't. And let's agree that we don't. And in this summit, you will see that in a closed door environment, as you network, as you have coffees, as you have lunch with other peers in the industry who are dealing with the same problem, you'll realize that part of what I'm talking about is an actual fact. The larger you are, the bigger your risk. The bigger nation you are, the bigger your risk. Because there's so much more that they can actually accept. So, what are we seeing? Here's what we are seeing. We are seeing the cases of hacking increase. The amount of malwares increase. You look at the amount of threats on social increase. All of our statistics are pointing in the wrong direction. We're not in the right direction. But yet our congregation is increasing, our budgets are increasing, our manpower is increasing, our policies are increasing, our governance increasing, but yet we are not on at the tipping scale of the problem. We're not able to solve this problem. All of the data sets shows the other direction, and we need to find a solution. So the question is this. If we look at the pharmaceutical industry, I take it took them 2,000 years to solve one problem in terms of the bubonic plague, but take a look at Ebola. I remember I was in Atlanta at the CNN Center. It's the worst place for you to be at the height of an Ebola outbreak, because there's giant screens. Everyone talks about the world coming to an end. Ebola is out. Oh my God. Don't get on a flight, you'll get Ebola. Don't shake hands, you get Ebola. Don't walk on the street, you get Ebola. Don't put kids in the school, you'll get Ebola. Where's Ebola now? We're here. Everything's back to normal. It took what? 1 week? 2 weeks of hype? 3 weeks of hype? 1 month? And then suddenly you start seeing things waning down. So, if you look at a swine flu, H1N1, H9N9, similarly, the Center of Disease Control and the pharmaceutical industry is able to grapple with the problem much quicker. And there must be something that we can learn from them, that we can implement in our industry. And that's the entire point what I'm trying to get at. And I'm trying to make you think through this problem and figure out what can we do better as a community so that we don't have such a long landing cycle, so that we're able to find a solution much quicker. So, now I got some important statistics to tell you, right? Malaysia is a small nation, right? And yet we are ranked number 10 in the world as one of the most attacked countries. Number 10 in the entire world. Well, we have 194 countries in the world, we're number 10. For a tiny nation like Malaysia, think of that for a second, right? I just told you the larger you are, the higher the chances and the probability of you actually being compromised. Well, then what went wrong here in this case? That means that our businesses, the businesses that are in Malaysia, is probably one of the most attacked businesses too. So we need to have a much higher amount of resilience, a much higher amount of awareness, a much higher amount of attention to ensure that we don't become part of the statistics. 1 out of all 8 incidents in the world happens here in Malaysia, if you were to convert the data from being number 10 in the world. Well, I guess in the Malaysian term, Malaysia boleh. But this is the one time we don't want this term. And this is the reason why we're here today, so that we can bring leaders together. Now, I will not bore you with a lot of statistics, but just a couple of critical points that you need to pay attention to. Security incidences across all verticals. Now, this is secondary research, which means that this data has been picked up by various reports across the world put together so that you are able to see a market vertical data. If you look at the data across all of these verticals, you would see that amount of sectors that have no idea. Have you been breached? No idea. How many security incidences do you have? No idea. To those that say we have been breached more than 50 times. If you look at the defense and aerospace industry, defense and aerospace, guys, the areas where normally you have the highest amount of budgets is as high as the Twin Towers on the screen. Defense and aerospace. If you look at other industries, right, the data looks bad all across. Financial services, right? I've got a lot of friends from financial services market here, right? The amount of governance, the amount of vigilance, the amount of budgets, the amount of systems that they have to go through, they have a very bad data as well. High amount of security incidences and breaches. And this in spite of everything that we have done. So the data does not look good. If we take a look at financial losses, right, this becomes even more interesting. The amount of problems that you're seeing again in the aerospace and airline industry. If you look all across, you look at the size of the financial loss, right? So don't be alarmed into thinking that, okay, 1 to 9 million, is only the aerospace industry. Take a look at all of the different industries and take a look at this from small to big. And these are just reported. And we all know, right? I mean, we are the honest people, right? In Malaysia, we report everything. Every single breach that we have, we report completely, right? But other countries don't normally do that, correct? Right? And if you look at the number of breaches that we're talking about, you are talking about different critical industries, financial sectors, transportation, logistics, hospitality, all having the same problem. The trend is absolutely negative. So, what do they do? What do corporations do across the world? Well, there are three major things that they do. Well, first of all, they will seek a third-party help. You call a consulting arm. I've got a problem. Can you help me out? One common thing that's being done. Some of them would say, engage the board proactively. The board will get in and say, okay, what do you need? You need better budgets? All right, we'll give you better budgets. You need more personnel? We'll give you more personnel. What do you require? We'll do whatever it takes to solve the problem. But let me tell you something to all of you CISOs in this room. What normally happens when you get breached, or the board gets very, very nervous that we might be breached because our friends in the industry across the region was breached, is they would find a magician by the name of CISO. Right? Am I correct? And they will assign this responsibility to the CISO. Now, this is a trap. Because out of the thousands of CISOs that I've personally engaged in my career over the last 15 years, I will tell you that the CISO always ends up being the scapegoat. When there is a breach, who do you look for? Who takes responsibility? Okay, no one's responding. So I got to do a test here, because this happened to me before. I went to China and I was talking to, in English for 25 minutes and no one's responding, almost like you guys. And I said, how many of you agree? Nobody raises their hand. How many of you disagree? Nobody raises their hands. And then I said, how many of you speak English? No one raised their hands. I realized I was in the wrong room. So I want to make sure you're in the right room. How many of you agree that the CISO is going to be the first person called up when there's a breach? Can you raise your hands, please? Okay, how many of you have hands? Okay, you all have hands, great. CISO, right? So you're talking about high pressure job, a position where, look at the statistics. You're going to get compromised. It's a matter of time. Because the terrain is huge. The bigger you are, the bigger your landscape, the bigger your problem, the bigger your third-party vendors, the bigger your systems, the bigger your risk terrain. And you are going to get compromised. The question is going to be, When are you going to get compromised? How are you going to get compromised? And how are you going to contain it? And that's where the concept of building a resilient organization comes along. So I've got some advice from you, from my friends in the pharmaceutical industry. Take a look at this. How many of you take Nexium? 24 hours cover. Nobody? Okay, we're going to provide discounts. We'll sell these drugs outside. This is a special drug for CISOs. This is one of the most powerful antacids. So if you're a CISO, and if you don't have stress, if you don't feel this burning sensation in your stomach, when you leave work at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I mean when you work half days, right? You go at 7 o'clock, and you don't feel stressed, there's something wrong. Because statistics show that your position is going to be the number one position you're going to get called. Any breach has happened, any issue with risk, any issue with governance, any issue with regulators, oh yeah, speak to Mr. CISO or Madam CISO. That's the person that's in charge, not us. And when you get breached, how does the CEO, save their organization? Change the CISO. We had a problem, we brought a new guy, a new woman, a new person, whoever it is. And this is our job in this world. Question is this, what does the CISO really do? Take a look at the slide real quickly. What does the CISO do? Actually, CISO does a lot. An actual CISO has to do everything. You will have to understand from the technical element, you got to understand architectures, you got to understand technology implementation, because technology is not going to get implementation without a security sign-up or sign-off, at least in proper organizations. You need to understand management and business, because how are you going to communicate with your board? How are you going to communicate with your CFO? You're going to go back to your CFO and say, I need more money. Okay, why? Well, look at the data, everyone's getting breached. Yeah, but we were not breached. Were we breached? No. So why do you want to solve a problem with more money when we never had a problem? You're going to have these ROI discussions. The board members are going to call you up and say, okay, I'm worried about shareholder value. Are we going to be a piece of news? Person, CEO, let me know. No, sir, you will not be a piece of news. Okay, so why do you want to double your budget? Why do you want to triple your budget? Because according to the line item, you should be, 13% of the budget. But you seem to want to invest in this technology. Why? Now guess what? You're talking to a non-technical person, a technical problem that you're dealing with. And then you're going to have to deal with the technology people and the tech security team. These are ethical hackers, penetration testers, tattoos all over their body, long ponytails, torn jeans. We don't see many of them here, but superbly brilliant people, PhDs. Now you're going to be a techie to them. And if you said, I'm a CISO, but when you talk of remote exploitation, what's that? I know what's malware, I know what's phishing, but exploitation, what do you mean by persistent threat, advanced persistent threats? I have no idea. They don't have respect for you. So now you're going to be a techie to the tech, you're going to be management to the managers, you're going to be a great communicator, you need to understand project management, because without that no security is going to get implemented. You're going to be a fantastic, effective communicator, because you need to rally the entire organization behind you. Can you see a pressure cooker environment now? That you seem to, you need to be everything to everyone. And that's the entire role. And that's the person, that one person that's going to take the bullet for the organization if anything goes wrong. And because of that, my friends, I'm telling you, Nexium's on sale. You should carry one with you. If you don't have stress, there is a problem, because that means you're Superman. Now, the word CISO, and this is something we experienced in Malaysia. When we invited CISOs only for this event, we realized that a lot of organizations don't use the word CISO, right? The trend is coming. Some of them use the word Director of Information Security. Some of them say Vice President of Security. Some use the word CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, but that's not a very common term that's being used. But there was a survey that was done, and slightly dated, given, and we went to, this was a survey that was done by Club CISO, and they went to a group and they said, okay, we want to ask you a very simple question. We want to understand, does your function that you report to of information security get to the board? At that time, 79% of them said yes, 21% of them said no, it doesn't get to the board, okay? And guess what? Just one study before that, a year before that, 70% of them says no, it's not going to get to the board. So you can see that just within a year or two, the board is now becoming extremely cognizant of information security. They are going to be asking you, can you give me the ROI and can you give me the matrix? What's the probability of us getting compromised? Right? What are we doing to be proactive? 4 or 5 questions. They have no time for technical details. Just give me the high level. Are we okay with the budget? What's our risk appetite? Where are we? What's the probability? What are you doing? Where are our gaps? These are going to be pretty much the questions that the board's going to be asking you. And if you belong to an organization where you have not done this, how many of you have presented to the board? Can you please raise your hands? All right. I would say 50%, 40 to 50% have already presented to the board. How many of you have not presented to the board? That means the board has not called you yet. Fantastic. Okay. So that's going to change. Now, as this happens, just look at the problem, right? I'll do a recap. Data shows we're being breached. Our data is all pointing in the wrong direction. We have shown that the one person that they would kind of summarize this problem to is going to be the CISO. We have shown that a CISO has a very wide role, has to be a magician, needs to be techie to the technical people, needs to be management to the board level people, needs to be a great communicator, needs to be a fantastic project manager. We've already talked about that. Needs to understand governance, risk, needs to understand all of this. Needs to be able to negotiate terms with technology vendors, because if you don't get the proper ROI, the CFO is not going to give you the budget. And yet, there's a shortage of the CISOs. And because of that, salaries and compensations for CISOs have been going up. So it's very common that in the CISO position, you would see a tremendous amount of rotation. You would work with one corporation, and next thing you know, you get poached by another. And your hike is going to be 30 to 40%. So there are various surveys that I'm not going to talk to you about, but guess what? In the US, $300,000 to $400,000 for a CISO is common, right? Although most data will show you about 220 is going to be the range, 220 US dollars, right? So you're wondering, why am I not in the US, right? But you want to take the actual stress that comes along with the jobs there, because, you know, there's going to be no relationship that's involved. And as this happens, $420,000 that's being paid to a CISO, there seems to be a leadership gap. Because there are 2 different schools of thought of what a CISO is supposed to be doing. There are some that play by the framework or the compliance model. So, all right, I'm a CISO. Under my industry, I could be a telco, I could be in BFSI sector. I've got certain, frameworks that I need to adhere to. So we're going to use a checklist model. As long as we follow what our regulators require us to do, you can't blame me for doing too little, and I'll make sure that we get all the checklists completed. There are others that say, no, not really, we can't just do that. We're going to be extremely technical. We'll be at forefront of technology. We will do the checklist stuff, but that's minimal. We want to be at the forefront. So we want to invest in threat intelligence. We want to invest in the right people. We want to go overboard with penetration testing. We want to look at our third-party vendor reviews. We want to make sure that, secure code review, whatever it might be. But data is showing that more commonly, the leadership gap is really finding a mix and balance of both of this. And this comes back to the wide role of CISO that I talked about. Having a CISO that's able to do both. Understands technology, technical, but also understands the risk version of a business. And what is happening across the world is that more and more CISOs are required to connect business risk to their security architecture. And this is where the entire population seems to be moving. And by this we mean this strategy. So you need to be able to understand business strategy and align your security strategy to your business strategy. So I'll give you a simple example. If let's say you were in e-commerce, and let's say you're in this part of the world, right? PCI compliance is not required, right? You could be in a country where PCI requirement is not mandated. But if you are in the e-commerce world, right? And if online business happens to be your core, whether or not that is required as part of compliance, this should be something that's in your appetite and says, well, I got to align my security strategy to the business strategy, right? So you could be in a traditional industry, right? For example, you could be in the construction industry. Now in the construction industry, there are lots of unique business transactions that takes place. And you might want to be able to assume certain amount of risk, which is not very common. So you will have to be able to be extremely agile so that you're able to adapt in your industry. And this is what is required of the CISOs that come forward. This is a report by IBM, and it'll actually tell you that security leaders are realizing that just checking the boxes, what used to be, is not going to work. So let me tell you the actual problem for the CISOs. Well, how do we create CISOs? How have we traditionally created CISOs? There's no school for CISOs. So we traditionally bring in senior executives with leadership quality, with great human and personnel capability, that are great communicators, and we bring it up, through experience, and we actually bring them up through the totem pole, and they eventually land the job of a CISO. Problem is that the CISO is now going to deal with threats that have never been seen before. They've got threats from all over the corners. And when I talk about Nexium, I'm not joking. I mean, I have personally met CISOs who have hypertension after they've landed the job, right? They have got tremendous amount of acidity. They go back at 8 or 9 o'clock and say, Jay, you know what? I can't even sleep, to be very honest. I feel heat in my body when I go to sleep because I'm so stressed. Because every now and then the CEO calls me and, hey, everything's going well. What do you think I'm going to say, Jay? No, it's not going well. To be honest, I think 60% of our systems are vulnerable because our third-party vendors are not really 100% sure that they've actually passed the benchmark. Sure, I've met all the minimal compliance requirements. You think I'm going to say that, Jay? What do you think I'm going to say? Oh yeah, everything's under order. Don't worry, sir. We are on it. But the truth is, in my gut, I know that's not the situation. And my biggest fear, Jay, is that the next morning I'll wake up or I get a root call at 2 o'clock in the morning and I realize that we've been compromised. And that's my real stress level. So this is the real world where CISOs are happening. And I'm going to talk a little bit in my limited time about what we can do. So what happened was, I was in New York having lunch with a representative from, I was in New York having lunch with the representative from Deloitte, a very good friend of mine. And the next day I was in DC meeting representatives of the US Navy. And that kind of changed the direction of EC Council. EC Council was always known for its ethical hacking and penetration testing expertise, right? And as I was having conversations, they were saying, look, the number one problem that we're facing now is that we have a shortage of leaders. We have no idea how to create CISOs. And we don't have enough of them. And organizations require them left, right, and center. So I said, wow, that's a very interesting problem. The next day, I was in DC, met up with the US Navy. They said, the Navy has the same problem. We are trying to identify leaders within the Navy that are going to be able to lead the nation. Sure, we have leaders right now, but how do we improve? How do we programize this? That led to a series of meetings, and eventually EC Council formed a board of CISOs across the world. We went through job task analysis, we did cut score analysis, we did psychometric analysis, and we came up with an objective that eventually became the Certified CISO examination, and we rolled out across the world. Now, what is unique as we learned that we did this, was we started realizing that the alignment of business strategy to security strategy was an area that was really lacking. Everybody understood the basics of everything. But how do you align this? How do you actually talk in ROI terms that actually makes the technical knowledge that you talk about actually convert into an ROI was the major problem. And the interesting thing that we learned across the world was that there is serious innovation that is lacking in our community. So I'm going to share with you 5 critical things that needs to be done so that perhaps we'll be able to lead the organizations a lot better. Number 1, we need to move from being urgent responders to proactive innovators. Now, let's take this a step back, right? If we look at the CISO community at large, do we actually connect with one another, right? Do we talk to each other? When you have a problem, do you pick up a phone and call another CISO and say, hey, I seem to have a breach? No. In our industry, you have a problem, what's the common thing to do? Don't say anything. Don't say anything to anyone. Keep quiet. Burn in hell, burn alone, take 5 Nexiums if you have to. Don't say, because if you say to the regulators, you're in trouble. You say to a friend of yours, a CISO in another community, oh my God, this is going to get leaked out. If the press comes to know, stock value is going to come down. That's the environment. But the question is, we got to move from being responders to innovators. How do we innovate in our organization? What are the new things that we are bringing in our organization as CISOs? Are we just doing the traditional thing, which is checkbox, regulators, risk, compliance? Or are we actually innovating? Are we finding better ways to do things better in our organization? This is a question that you should have in your heart when you walk out of here. You should, if I were to ask you in a panel, and I will to my panelists, what is the thing, what's the innovation that you have brought in your organization? You should be able to say, Jay, let me tell you, 1, 2, 3. These are innovations that I brought in the organization. It could be a way to train people better. It could be a way to share information better. It could be a way to implement a policy better. It could be a way to reduce risk better. It could be any one of those. Number 2, we seem to be very methodical managers, and this is something that we see all the time. In the consulting world, EC Council Global Services meets with CISOs, and we say, okay, no. We got to follow everything through a methodology. Here's a methodology. We have a framework. It could be an ISO framework, it could be a COVID framework, it could be any framework that we're talking about. We're going to follow the methodology, and we're going to follow it to the T. But what we should be talking about is really being agile adapters. How do we bring agility in our business? Because you know very well, I've already told you what your role is. I've already told you the risk terrain is huge. If you're going to be just methodical, say, I'm just going to follow, everyone says you got to go A to Z, so I'm going to go A, B, C, D, and I'm going to go that way, you're going to miss tremendous areas that actually cause high risk in your organization. And that's something that you can't be able to do. So you will have to be able to be a very agile adapter, adapting your business strategy to your cybersecurity strategy, and adapting your cybersecurity strategy to your business strategy. Number 3, compliance managers. Oh, we got to be compliance managers. We got to make sure everything's compliance. But how do you educate your people? How many of you have actually brought in your entire organization as part of a security terrain? I'm talking about knowledge workers. I'm talking about the receptionists. Does the receptionist understand that if somebody walks in that is not been properly badged, and they just walk in. If a contractor comes in and says, I'm part of the HVAC cleaning crew, I'm part of the regular cleaning crew, I'm a pizza delivery guy. Does your receptionist understand that that pizza delivery person could actually be a hacker? And it's your role as part of the security culture of the organization to stop that person at the front. Do we do that? So are we educators? Are we influencers? Do you have policies in your organizations that have been written like 17,000 years ago, and everyone comes and signs this 21-page paper and nobody understands what the hell they signed about? And you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about very well. So what have you done? How are you going back to the community and saying, guys, you signed this. Let me tell you what this means. Let me tell you the risk of clause number 4. Let me show you 4 different examples of what just happened this month because someone did not follow. Now you understand why our company has clause 4 in page 2 of your policy? Because of this. How many of us do that? How many of us see the role of CISOs to do that? So that becomes another major point. Now, tactical operators or strategic leaders. This is another evolution that needs to take place. We cannot just be tactical, we have to be very strategic, which means we have to actually pay attention to the actual strategy of the business. I keep bringing business to security. You can't just be tactical. Okay, we got to have third-party developers that are going to come in and do our app testing. We're going to have penetration testers that are going to do pen testing. We're going to buy every solution that's out there because I've got a very generous board. But are we understanding how are we applying that to a strategy of the business? For example, you might be doing acquisitions. Your group might do acquisitions. Before you do acquisitions, as a strategy, are you actually doing a cyber risk analysis? Or are you just issuing a check and say, okay, here you go, I'll buy you for $1.2 billion. And then say, oops, we just acquired a company with tremendous amount of risk. They don't seem to have a security culture at all. All of the vendors seem to have holes left, right, and center. And now, we've inherited a far bigger problem before we even started the journey. So that becomes another important element. And finally, we need to move from being technicians to talent magnets. Because cybersecurity defense is all about being able to attract the right talent. Which means you need to be inspirational yourself. If you happen to be a boring, dry cybersecurity leader that says, you know what, I'm only interested in compliance, and these are what our regulators want, we're going to follow the minimalist approach, are you going to be able to attract the right talent in your organization? Especially where salaries are up on the rise. this becomes a major problem. So you're going to be required to go out and be able to be the motivator, to be the speaker. And that's why in events like this, when you become a moderator, when you become a panelist, you're able to share your views, right? The idea is for you to be able to bring back the thoughts that you learn in closed door events like this back to your organization so that your organization actually benefits. Now, one critical problem that we face, and I think we can learn from the technical folks compared or from C-level folks, is if we take a look at all of these various hacking groups, do you realize that they seem to be pretty well organized? I mean, take a look at organizations like Anonymous. If you say Anonymous is coming after you, any organization, regardless of their budget, would be absolutely afraid. They are extremely organized, they attack with precision, and you know that coming after you, they are going to get you. It's just a matter of scale. But one other thing that you'll realize is that these communities seem to have great following, great conferences. How many of you have been to DEF CON in the US? 18,000 people. 18,000 people paying $100 cash. The lines are 1 mile long. I'm serious. When I say a mile long, I'm saying a mile long. That's the line that you would see. Right? And this is going to go all the way out of the hotel to get into a room that will accommodate 300 people. 90% of them won't get into the room. But they are sharing, they're talking the latest vulnerabilities, they're talking about your systems. They're talking about your organizations. They're talking about bypassing the latest systems, the latest defense mechanisms out there. What do we do? Does the good community get together? Do we meet? Do we talk? Do we exchange ideas? And this is why you're here. The entire point of the CISO Summit that EC Council organized all across the world is to have a closed door, vendor neutral environment. You don't see vendors around here. No one's here to pitch you anything. No one's here to tell you, can you please buy my system? Can I meet you tomorrow? This is a no pressure zone. This is how it was designed. And we have run this all across the world and we've had tremendous success. The one way that you will benefit out of these events is if you contribute, and that's why Slido is there. This is where your comments will come. Now, during the panel sessions, each one of the panel moderators is going to be holding a screen and they're going to be seeing your comments. So it's a micless environment because a lot of people might be shy to go to the mic and ask a question. Write a question right there. Share, network. During your coffee breaks, don't leave after lunch, which is very common in Malaysia. Don't leave after lunch. Come back after lunch. We've got a fantastic speaker from Standard Chartered and we have got more panels in the afternoon. And this is a time when you network, when you build the camaraderie that's lacking from our community. So that the next time you have a problem, you have someone to call to. For example, how many of you call another CISO and say, hey, I'm doing a vendor evaluation. Can I have off-the-cuff response from these 3 vendors who've had have you had a good experience? How many of you have done that? How many of you felt comfortable doing it? Only 2. Only 2 hands, guys. 2 hands. Which means the rest of you do it yourselves. With whatever knowledge you have, either full or half knowledge, that's for you to answer. But we hope to change that through these events, where you will be able to now have friends and say, hey, I want to ask you off-the-cuff question. What's your experience? Have you had a bad experience? Is this a good experience? Is it a way to go? Hey, how do you vendor evaluation? What's your RFP format look like? Right? And you'll be surprised at the lessons that we will be able to share with each other and we'll be able to learn from one another. And this is why we run the Global CISO Forums all across the world, and we hope that you will benefit. Right here at the event, we actually have a certified CISO class that's taking place. We brought in Mr. Boda Gupta, who's the moderator for the next panel, a very seasoned professional who was responsible for the setting up of the information security practice in Mercedes-Benz. He's worked out of Detroit, he's worked out of Stuttgart. You will truly enjoy his presentation. And he's actually going to be delivering a 5-day class for aspiring CISOs and CISOs for that matter right here, which starts tomorrow. So we are proud of being able to do that. And we hope that next year when we run the CISO Summit, we are going to be bringing our awards, our ASEAN awards, our CISO awards here, so that we're able to celebrate success, we're able to inspire leaders to do better, and we hope that that will mean that we'll finally be able to vaccinate our problem and be able to convert the curve to a different line. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Please enjoy the conference, network, ask questions, and have tremendous fun. Thank you very much.